Well, welcome to the Connected Enterprise Podcast. This is Carl Lewis, your host, and my guest today is Jonathan Chin of Facteus. Welcome, Jonathan. Tell us a little bit about yourself to start off with and about Facteus.
Hey, Carl. Thanks for having me on. My name's Jonathan Chin. I am the co-founder here at Facteus. We are a data company and we specialize in consumer transaction data. So we have a panel of consumer credit and debit card holders, and we can mine their data to create insight products, reports, or just data products in general. We are in an emerging market called DaaS, data as a service, that we'll talk to a little bit more. I lead up our growth and our data strategy team here at Factius, and happy to be here.
Welcome. And I don't want to let it go without saying that Jonathan is one of the rare people that I've gotten interviewed that actually lives in my home city, Portland, Oregon. There's two of us. Well, Jonathan, you mentioned it, data as a service, DaaS, it's called. We have SaaS and now we have DaaS. What is it exactly?
Obviously, the acronym speaks for itself as far as data as a service. I have a love hate relationship with the acronym itself. It definitely helps provide insight to people that aren't familiar with it, where we're a technology service company that specializes in data. We definitely operate differently than normal software companies. To go back to what is a DaaS company, essentially what separates us from software is our major and main product that we sell to our customers is data. That could come in many different forms, but access to data that our customers don't currently have is really our value add and value proposition. That can take many forms, like data feeds to dashboards to GPT insight products, but the core value proposition is still that this is data that our customers did not have access to prior to purchasing our products.
It's credit card data. Where are all the places that data comes from? And I know you guys do some like amalgamation of data from other sources also, not just credit and debit card transactions. Do you see any new sources of data on the horizon?
Yeah, so I think as the digitization of everything, the internet just continues to expand. I think, yes, more and more data is just going to be more available. I think the obvious things that we talked about where we specialize is how people spend money. That could be your grocery loyalty card, credit and debit cards, these new forms of payments like PayPal, Venmo, Affirm, buy now, pay later. So how people spend money is actually emerging and changing as we speak. So more data from that ecosystem is going to obviously be valuable and trickle in. But I think just more data is being created every day. I think there's some stat that like the majority of the data that we all see has been created the last like 2 years because it just continues to grow in size in this kind of infinite exponential rate. Search data was a big thing before. I'm really interested now with the emergence of these generative AIs. What are people using that for? And how does that story tell about what people are working on or thinking about, aspiring to, maybe shopping for, or where is society going? There's always going to be new data as everything just becomes more digital and trackable.
When I first looked at ChatGPT, I think it was version 3, and now I
Mhm.
think we're at version 4, and it's going to keep morphing. Part of that is the data, that
Mhm.
there's more data periodically so you can update it with more data. What role will data as a service play fueling that growth of ChatGPT and any of these other, because there are competitors, of course, to what we call large language models like ChatGPT? What role will DaaS play in that?
As far as the large language models are concerned, totally agree with you. There's a lot of competition, and we're going to get to a point probably in the very near future where between the Google Bard model or the OpenAI Microsoft ChatGPT model, there's going to be some congruency or some level of sameness and averageness that we all can just say, I don't know, it's splitting hairs, which one's better, quote unquote, or not. I think where the differentiation is really going to come is either their ability to understand and synthesize data or its ability to train on data that the other doesn't have. And I think that's where DaaS can become a really important industry in pushing these forward. I also think overall, these have become APIs. These language models have become integral in kind of the next wave of startups that are being funded right now in the VC world. I think that differentiation in those kind of use case based language models, data is going to be the only thing that differentiates them because without some unique proprietary data, I don't see why Google and Microsoft can't just beat whatever startup that starts building on top of them. I think data is just going to be this key element that helps differentiate. I also think it's going to help expand it because at least in our world, from a DaaS perspective as a data vendor, one of the biggest hurdles to either expand the market or even get customers is educating customers about kind of the domain knowledge of data. Because data is still pretty emerging space, if I sold you data, Carl, I'd have to explain to you how to look at transaction data to make it useful for your business or how it could help your business grow revenue, expand customers, understand competitors. And that domain knowledge, I think, can be baked into these large language models to essentially create more data users or expand the market.
It seems like what you have is a lot of data, and a lot is the right word. It's a lot, but it's fairly general. Do you see
Mhm.
sort of specialties getting created in your industry as you move forward?
I think there's room for specialty. I think the challenge in specializing too narrowly, at least as a DaaS company, is you have to have essentially a large enough customer base or total available market TAM to build a business. There's a high cost of building a data business, but we're in this because we think there's a high profitability at a certain threshold or critical mass. Part of why we pursue generalization of spending is because any specific category, for example, let's say coffee shop spending, if we went super deep into that, the available market is just too small for us to warrant just a staff of X number of data engineers, data scientists, and business leaders. But I do think the future can be anything. I do think as markets just grow in general and data itself grows in general, specialization might be required.
As much data is there about coffee shop expenditures, it's not really enough for somebody to just make a data business around that at this point in time.
Yes, I would say, at least coming from my experience, there's a lot of different data you can from an angle perspective. I think there's just not enough end customers that would pay you money for that depth of knowledge.
Doing a little reading about data as a service, some industry experts are saying that this new industry is really positioned for tremendous growth. Why do you think they think that?
I think we're in this really interesting time that has coalesced with technology and how people run businesses, even all these AI technologies that are emerging. I think big data technology, I would consider it ubiquitous now. I think if a firm is not using big data, they're aware of it, they understand the players, people know about big data. Marketing companies have done a really good job about, in a scary way, positioning how data can be used to create more efficiencies in a process despite a lot of creepiness and potentially unlawful or immoral ways that marketers are using data. It's highlighted the fact that data is valuable, though. However, we probably do need to put some privacy and restrictions around how people use it. And also, I think AI in general has created a huge intake in not just the ability, like I was saying before, where people could synthesize data and AI create all the contextualization, but also just the idea that training these AIs is also just as important on data. I think all of these are kind of coalescing into a huge opportunity for the DaaS industry because we're unlocking data in a way. I feel sometimes the analogy is we're the miners and we're unlocking all these valuable nuggets that are hard to get to. It's not easy for just anyone to do it, but once they're unearthed, people see tremendous value. And I think now there's just more applications for it.
The last time we spoke, we were talking a bit about people that start businesses. A lot of small businesses are really started by what we say the seat of your pants or a gut feel. And a lot of them fail
Mhm.
because, in my estimation, that's how they got started without much market information. It seems to me like this could be a boom for somebody who's looking at starting a business. Let's say, as we talked about last time, they want to put a restaurant on XYZ corner. You were saying you could find out, do people in this general area go out to eat? What's the available market that you're competing against in terms of, are there customers out here? Or am I putting a restaurant where there's only people 70 to 85 years old who are too tired to go out to eat? I would think that it has that kind of capability. Can you give us some examples of other ways that the data is being used today? Some of your customers, what kind of questions are they asking to get answers to?
You hit the nail on the head. The type of information that used to be available, probably a very expensive consultant, and they might run surveys or some professional survey that isn't that accurate or empirical, was the means. If a small business owner wanted to start a business like a restaurant, that was their only means to do it. You're 100% right. Data is at your fingertips, and companies like Facteus, us and a lot of other people in our industry can make that data available to entrepreneurs. I'd say besides like an entrepreneurial way, there's a few different places that our data is being used. One of the big use cases that we operate in or markets is actually the investment market. Basically, active stock traders use our data to understand trends about companies. And for them, timeliness matters. They're looking at a lot of different data sets, but understanding how Target or Walmart are doing within a quarter from a sales perspective year over year is definitely something they'd pay for. Same store sales is a really big number quoted in those financial reports that come out quarterly. They could use our data to get a sense of what those are going to look like before those reports come out. That's like one use case. That's a big market of
Mhm.
people. I think you hit one that was restaurants looking for potentially different places to open a store. Market share is a big one that a lot of just retailers look to us in general because that data is not easy to get to just because they have a lot of their own data, but not their competitors' data. So market share. Also in the restaurant category, though, is the emergence of these delivery services. So we can see how are people utilizing delivery services from where and how much. Is there a winner or loser? Is it Uber Eats? Is it Grubhub? One might offer better rates for a restaurant, not sure. But we can see all that data from a preferential perspective. Same with grocery delivery. That's been a big uptick on people trying to understand not just grocers, but even the CPG companies that are looking to get placement on shelves, those type of things. The actual brands are looking for that type of data. So our consumer data has a lot of depth from a behavioral perspective. Post pandemic, a lot of spending behaviors have changed, and some of those things have stuck.
And my family have had here or there meal delivered prior
Mhm.
to the pandemic when everybody is just really feeling tired and
Yeah.
nobody wants to cook. I'd say that's tenfold what it used to be. An awful lot of buying habits have changed.
Sorry, I was just going to say
Yeah.
anecdotally, grocery delivery has been a big one in our family. Like we like to cook. We don't eat out too much, maybe tenfold, maybe more from a grocery delivery,
Yeah.
especially like Instacart and Costco. A Costco visit can be between parking, the lines, the people. Sometimes you're
Yeah.
like, you know what? It's just easier. I don't want to go and deal with all that and just
Yeah,
pay.
and if you go, the cart ends up being full, but if
Oh,
you
yeah.
shop online, you can just get what you want within a certain limit, right?
Total. You won't get tempted by that wine aisle, right, Carl?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, that's one of them. This type of technology, how does it really impact in the end an individual consumer or even just a small business? All technology in the end rolls downhill to the individual person. As I
Mhm.
told you when we met, I'm a charter member of the Gadget Club, right? So I am sure that at some point this is going to mean something to me on a regular routine basis, but I can't quite see that now. Maybe you have an idea.
Specifically, you're talking about these AI technologies and how data is going to unfold in them.
Yeah.
I think at the individual level, there's just going to be a skill empowerment. Individuals that adopt this are going to accelerate their ability to be productive with quality. I use ChatGPT personally every day for my work. It has saved me time. I would say, in the grand scheme of hours, it has saved me time. I don't think it could have done all the work for me from an automation perspective. That's probably part of it's the nature of what I do, but 100% has saved me hours of work. Internally, some of my data engineers and some of our other like UI engineers, it has saved a lot of time as far as researching code. Nowadays, languages are so large from a technical perspective, people don't need to know everything about every language, but they need to know kind of the basics. And researching how to do something has always been part of just the development cycle. Now, with these kind of technologies, our engineers are like, oh, I just ask it for a function that does this and this and this. It writes it for me and I just fix it and then it's
Yeah.
done. But I think for businesses, in a very similar way, how at least professional individuals like us are using it to make ourselves more efficient, I think businesses can do the same. I think a small business can stay smaller longer with these technologies. So if you're an SMB, me, I'm in the growth side. So I know from a marketing perspective, marketing is an extremely expensive function in a business. As you buy real estate to get eyeballs, as well as it's very time consuming to create content or create ads or create things. ChatGPT is a great way to augment a single employee dedicated to marketing and really make them 4x more efficient than they were before. Now, it won't like reduce marketing costs from a like marketing perspective, but the headcount allocated, it might help you explore more opportunities at the same time while staying lean and small and reactive.
But it's access to all of this collection of data that really gives it the power to be able to do that kind of thing for you. As you and I talked, you mentioned there's a degree of personal information, about all of this, the charges that people make and that stuff. And I think people worry about, everybody knows everything I'm doing and has access to all of that. There are steps that you take to shield that and keep people's private information private. Can you help us understand what some of that is?
That's a great point. As far as data stewardship, Facteus, so we actually utilize a technology called synthetic data. It is something we've developed as an application. It's not a concept or an industry we've created. We have our own way of doing it. So when we gather data from essentially our partners that are banks, processors, credit card companies, the data is actually obfuscated, or in other words, we've injected mathematical noise into the data so that transactions will never look exactly like Carl Lewis's bank statement. Dollar amounts could be changed, dates and times could be changed slightly here and there. So nothing would ever match or tie to you or could be reverse engineered. And the reason we did that was even though laws have never caught up to technology ever, but they do incrementally grow and change and make progress. And we think at the end of the day, as far as data as a service and DaaS as an industry, data privacy and data stewardship has to catch up. And so we took an initiative to do that up front when we started the company because we didn't want to put our company in jeopardy because that's all we do. And we have seen other companies kind of rise and fall. You might have read some of the news where, like, cell phone location tracking companies, a lot of that data has been used nefariously and inappropriately. And that was something we never wanted to get caught in. I also think that did exclude us because we added noise from different markets where people were monetizing data before us. We have just chosen that even though those are big markets, mainly targeted marketing and advertising, there are more opportunities growing in what we're seeing today, and those are catching up.
It's a good thing that you guys stepped out and started doing that from day one. The public appreciates it, I'm sure. Everybody has their own angst about all the data that's gathered. A few of us that are worried about an Alexa in every room and that sort of thing. All of that's kind of part of the technology picture we're still drawing for sure. Jonathan, this is a fascinating industry that you're a part of. People sort of hear about it, but don't get to hear from somebody in the industry very often. So thanks for peeling back the onion a little bit and letting us understand a bit about what you guys are doing at Factius and what its relevance is for us as we look into the future. I think we'll understand a little bit better having spoken with you today. So thank you for being part of the Connected Enterprise podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's always great talking with you, Carl,
Great.
especially about tech. And, yeah.
Yeah, well, I've managed to learn a thing or two over 25 years. That's how it goes. Whether you want to or not, I think sometimes. It's sticky. That's all I can say. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in today. We'll see you again on the next episode of the Connected Enterprise podcast.